Hi, how are you? How are you
Doing
doing?
well. It's so great to see you.
I know, I'm so excited. I'm gonna be a little awkward, just a heads up. I haven't done many interviews before. I actually done one. It feels a little bit weird doing this right now, just to be transparent here. But again, I'm
No
excited and
worries.
I'm happy to have you here with me. How about we start with an introduction? Who are you?
My name is Nathan. My author name is Nathan R. Allen,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm the author and cover designer of the book The Heretic. My background is in 3D animation, so I make like cartoon TV shows for Disney, making Star Wars TV shows. I've been at Lucasfilm for 7 years now and been at some other studios before that. That's kind of my background.
That is insane. Well, when you first sent me that email introducing yourself and talking about your book and whatnot, asking for a review, I thought you were some kind of scammer. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, Star Wars? Disney? What are you doing in my inbox? What are you doing here? So that was kind of unbelievable, but I'm very honored that you reached out to me and that we're doing this today. That's crazy though. Those are big, big companies and franchises to be working for. What got you into that actually? I assume it was a passion of yours.
So I definitely art was a passion of mine all growing up. I love to draw and paint and do those things. I also had some experience growing up kind of doing digital art, which was, I mean, I don't know, it's not so new, but I think for my age when I was little, it was kind of hard to do
Yeah.
and I was doing it from a young age. And then when I got to college, actually, I was doing like a pre-business major and I was like, I don't like this. My mom's like,
Yeah.
you should look into animation. So I was like, okay. So I studied 3D animation in college and then tried really hard and eventually got a job at Lucasfilm.
It paid off. I wish I could study art at school and stuff, but alas, that did not happen. However, just practice in your free time gets you a long way, right?
It does, yeah.
So you mentioned Star Wars and Disney and whatnot. What was the actual biggest project you've worked on so far in this
Um,
department in art and animation?
in art and animation.
Yeah.
Well, most of my career has been at Lucasfilm, and probably one
Yes.
of the biggest things I've done was the 7th season of Clone Wars,
Oh.
the animated show. So that was fun because I kind of grew up with some of that Clone Wars show, and then I was able to work on the final season when I made it there. So that was pretty exciting for me.
Okay. Oh my gosh, I can't even begin to imagine like being a fan of a franchise and then getting to work on it, being personally involved in such a big thing. Sounds
Yeah,
awesome.
it is fun. I grew up loving like spaceships and stuff,
Oh
and I
yeah.
never think that like knowledge would be relevant. But
Yeah.
in my career, I'm like, oh, I know the name of that ship and this one. So it was kind of fun.
That's awesome. So, more importantly, was The Heretic your first writing project? Did you start from The Heretic or did you write stuff before it? Maybe as practice or just in general?
So for the most part, this is kind of a mixed answer, but I
Yeah.
haven't really written anything before this book.
Yeah.
But my early drafts and my early kind of versions of it were so different that I feel like I wrote a couple books before this one, even though it was all trying to be
The
kind of the
Heretic.
same book. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, interesting. So you knew what you wanted to write from the beginning, even though it was still not really well shaped yet.
Kind of. It definitely changed a lot through the versions. So I kind of learned what I wanted to do as well as I went.
I could see like there was much care and love put into it. I'm sure like the review that I left on Goodreads probably sounded bad. I always sound so harsh when I'm not trying to be. We'll talk about this later. Let's not divert from our questions here, but essentially I really liked the book. So how many books do you have planned for this series?
First of all, I just want to say thank you
Oh,
for liking it. I appreciate that.
sure.
But to answer your question, I this is a 3 book series, is what I have planned.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm well underway working on that second book, and I'm really excited about that one as well.
Awesome. I honestly have no idea where the story could go from here. I'm sure there's a lot that's still to happen, but this is no criticism. I'm just very curious as to where it's gonna go. A lot happens in this first book already, so. Ooh, can you actually give us a general idea of the heretic? If you had to describe it briefly without much spoilers, how would you describe the book?
So I guess kind of the easy description is it is a fantasy book, kind of epic fantasy tone. There's a lot of magic and mystery within it. There's kind of a lot of action. If you've read Brandon Sanderson, I feel like my action style is a little bit like that, where it's more of like one-on-one count combat,
Mm-hmm.
maybe a little bit more like superhuman or superhero-esque powers a little bit in that
Yeah.
regards. So it's epic fantasy. There's kind of like big empires, rebellions, stuff like that going on, intrigue, a little bit of that. I would say the main premise is our main character, Damien. He's like a magical engineer, is how I described it. So kind of like if we took like programming or, stuff in our world and turned it into a medieval fantasy, that's kind of what he does.
Yeah.
And he was working through that, trying to get a degree, and then everything goes wrong. His brother, stuff happens. I'm trying not to do spoilers.
Yeah.
Stuff happens, everything goes wrong, and he needs to use his skills as kind of like that magical engineer and card player
Yeah.
to kind of solve his problems.
That's a good summary. Stuff happens on every page. You don't get a break ever. Oh, and I'm interested in this one because there's some elements that might be a bit intense in this one. I definitely got upset on some occasions. What would be the target audience here? Is it meant to be young adult or perhaps older?
That's a great question. I generally term this as new adult, which is kind of an in between target audience. I don't feel like that one's really been fully determined yet, but I think it's a little old for YA, maybe. And I don't feel like it's fully adult. Like I try to keep things fairly.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether I mentioned this later. It was actually one of the questions that I was wondering about. I don't know if it's relevant in this instant right now, but I'm gonna ask anyway. How old is Damien supposed to be? Because I went into it thinking that he was 17 because of the flashbacks titles, but then I realized he might actually be more towards 20-ish, right?
I think I have him as 19. I'm trying to remember if that's towards the end of the book or kind of earlier on in the beginning. But around 19, yeah. So for very late teens.
Okay, gotcha. Because you see, I won't change my script now that I know this information, but I mentioned the fact that I was confused about the age and some concerns that I have regarding the stuff that happens to him. Yeah, it's heavy sometimes. Yeah. So, big section and perhaps the biggest aspect of this book, the world building. I mean, it's a big element to expand on in any fantasy book. I feel like if you want to create your own world. So what was the spark of inspiration for this one? Was it specific historical period, geographical location, or something just out of your head?
Mostly out of my head. I do think that, like you talked about geographical location, right? So I didn't have any specific place I was referencing so much visually.
Yeah.
But I'm a very visual person, like my background is painting and stuff like that. And so I kind of created these images in my head or drew some like sketches of them at different points. And so kind of dramatic environments were kind of important to me. Like in Avignon, the capital city, it's this vertical city on a cliff. And I just thought that was kind of fun and compelling and built different things out that way. So I had a lot of visual influence in terms of kind of the world building, try to make the scale interesting and stuff like that. But then probably most of it was, I just also really liked the idea of like creativity to be able to solve problems or different things. So a big part of world building for me was like, how do I take someone who's maybe doing something mundane, like again, like a magical programmer, and kind of what does that look like in the world? So like, how does that affect the technology or the magic throughout the world and things like that? And so those kind of just using magic in a way like that, and then also kind of big vista dramatic environments are kind of some of the big inspirations for me.
And that's something I really appreciated because I studied science growing up, and I feel like being creative was almost frowned upon. It was always logic. I just really like the idea of combining the two, and Damien does a really good job at portraying that and make it seem very cool. Also, I must say, having a fear of heights, the description of that world was a nightmare. I was like, I could not, never. Either I'd be at the Pillars, is that the name of the town, right? Or all the way down in Dockside. Traveling between the two is just pick one and stay there forever.
Sorry.
I did notice, though, there are some French-sounding names, and I was wondering about that, if there was some inspiration there. Was it done on purpose?
It is. So I should say that's one of my influences. I really love the sounds of French things and French architecture and stuff like that. So I did kind of allude to French-sounding things, especially for, I would say, the Empire, where Damien is from. That was kind of French sound based.
I'm glad I caught that. I was like, hold on. My first language is French, so when I was reading those names, instinctively I was reading them with a French accent. Like I would read them in a French way, if that makes any kind of sense.
That's awesome.
I was wondering about that, and that's very cool.
That is cool. I have a friend
Yes.
who speaks French fluently, and so I would ask him different questions. Like I had a name for, if you remember, for saying mayor.
Yes.
I'm probably saying it poorly, but it was a different name before, and he was like, "That doesn't quite mean what you think it means." And he kind of explained stuff to me, and so I changed it to make a little more sense.
That's awesome. I love that about languages. They're just so enriching in so many ways. If someone were to visit your world, what's the first place you'd recommend where they get to truly experience its essence? I'm terrified of the answer because I'm like, to get the full experience, I feel like everywhere is terrible, but Dockside would be the worst.
I was going to say the lifts, so like the vertical train tracks, which is probably also not great for you because you don't love heights, but that would give you kind of a great feeling of, I feel like, the world. You traveling up these essentially giant elevator trains going across the whole city, so you get to see everything.
I would actually try it. If it's like in a enclosed cabin where I feel rather safe, I feel like it would work out. I feel like the scenery would be distracting enough. So yeah, no, I didn't think of the lifts. That's a good one. Oh, I want to hear about this. So what are some of the unique challenges or quirks of living in your world that readers might find fascinating?
So I kind of came up with two. The first one, again, is going to the magic system. So the magic in this world is, the most common application of it is very like written based, kind of like programming. I say runes, so a lot of writing and logic to kind of make this magic happen. And then it's all that magic comes from the energy comes from people. So kind of like to turn on the light switch, you have to like plug in and it burns some of your calories to turn on the lights, essentially, you know.
That's a great workout. I wish we had that.
Yeah. That's pretty different from our world because we're used to using just like electricity or external sources of energy. But in this one, it's all based off of kind of like your own energy or maybe someone else's, but that's a pretty big difference. The other one was just that in our world, we're a single species of humans.
Yes.
In this world, there are kind of humans, and then there's things called theriopes.
Yes.
Which is kind of like the second species that's very common in that world. I think that'd be a pretty big difference.
If you could cross over into your fantasy world for a day, what would you do? I have an answer for this one, and I feel like you're going there. I don't know. Let's see.
I'm curious what your answer is.
I feel like for one day, if we're going to ignore the horrors, right? I would spend the day at the tap room and learn how to play Radiate. I feel like that's the straightforward answer to have. That's the correct answer, because what else would you like to do aside from ride in the lifts, you know?
Yeah. So that's where I was gonna go to. I would say I'd go to a tap room and play Radiate.
That was such a peaceful time in the book because everything else is chaos, you know? It was just very fun. Although I will admit, I'm not sure how Radiate works. But that's because, just like you, I'm a visual person, so if I'm going to learn a new game, I need to see a round played in front of my eyes to know how it functions. But I was very interested in it. I thought it was very cool that you... Did you come... Oh, actually, I have a question about it later, but we'll skip to it. Radiate, is it based on a real card game, or did you come up with it entirely?
So, growing up, my family loved to play different card games, board games, all sorts of different things, but we also loved card games, so like old face card games with suits, whether that's Up and Down the River, Rook, Spades, just different games like that. And so it's loosely based off of some variations of that and other games like it, but it is a little bit different. And I have kind of come up with rules for myself. I didn't fully explain it in the book because as I was practicing and getting feedback, it was pretty boring to have like too much explanation. So I leave it fairly vague.
That's funny because I didn't think it was jarring or anything. I thought there was a good amount of explanation. I was glad to read about it. I thought it was fun. What's one detail about your world that you're particularly proud of that might get overlooked on a first read? I'm interested if I overlooked anything.
That's a tricky question. So I've talked about how I really like the creativity side of kind of the main character and how he has to solve problems through, you know, making ideas and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I would say as a writer, the difference between like creative problem solving and like just convenient solutions is I feel like foreshadowing. Because it's like if the character came up with the idea out of nowhere, that feels a little too convenient. So I feel like foreshadowing all of the ideas that Damien had, all the creative solutions was really important. So maybe the first time through reading the book, you may not notice all the times like the solutions came up in advance of the actual event. So maybe the second time through, if you were to read the book again, you might see, oh, this is where the first time maybe that solution idea kind of was planted.
You know, it's interesting because I'm trying, and I'm failing. I'm replaying the whole book in my mind right now, uh, because I have terrible memory. But I'm certain that on a couple occasions I was like, oh, so this is what that was. So I think you did a good job there at planting hints, although I didn't, catch them at all. It's only at the reveal moment that I was like, oh, okay, we've seen this before. Like, this is what happened then. I get it now. So that's interesting. Now I want to know about it, but I don't remember.
And we
My
can't do spoilers, so I can't give you
No.
specifics.
No, we can't do spoilers. Magic! How would you describe your magic system in 3 words?
Written energy redirection.
Whoa, that's basically it. Although it does, without context, I guess it doesn't mean much. But when you know
No.
what's going on, it does make a lot of sense.
Yeah. With 3 words, it's kind of tricky. But yeah, written, because it's a lot of writing, like the
Yes.
runes, the coding, and the energy is talking about like it has to come from the strength of a person, and then it's redirected to do something else besides its like natural course of making your arm move or something.
So, what are the limitations and consequences of using magic in your world? Is there a price to pay?
It's a good question. So there's a lot of limitations with it. I'm kind of a little bit partial. I like all kinds of magic in different fantasy books, but in this example, in my book, it's a very kind of hard system. So it's kind of clear in terms of what you can and can't do, or at least in my head when I've kind of been making it. And so the limitations are it has to come, the energy to do your magic, whatever it is, has to come from a person, and you can't store it. So that's actually a really big one. It's like, how do you have more power than what you currently have energy for? And for the most part, the answer is there isn't. You can't like put it in a battery or whatever. So that's a big limitation. There's creative solutions to that, but that's one of the big limitations. And then of course, because it's coming from you, if you're like, I want to run extra fast, you can like take energy from other parts in your body, but then you wouldn't be a good long distance runner because then you become more tired quicker.
Right.
So that's another big limitation.
If magic were real, what mundane task would you use it for in your own life?
I like this question. So we've talked a lot about how the magic system is kind of like energy manipulation, where you can be like, I'm going to take the strength from here and put it here so I can like run farther or whatever. But there's a lot of creativity, again, kind of coming back to that theme, that you can use. So I really liked how in the book, one of the characters is like, I don't want to smell this bad smell. So they took energy away from their nose, right?
Yeah.
So like, that's cool. So it's not how am I enhancing something? It's how am I reducing something? I think that's a cool idea. So I think that's something I would use is if there's ever like some gross smell I don't like, I could turn off my nose, or if this food tastes bad, I could turn off my taste or something. I don't know. If I want peace and quiet, I could turn off my ears.
Oh.
I don't know. Things like that would be kind of fun.
I could use that one. I didn't even think of that. That's actually interesting. Who is your favorite character to write?
So I have 2 answers for this. The first one, and my wife makes fun of me for this one a little bit, but the character Kai, he's the big warrior Theriope. I think he's fun to write because he has like a few pure motivations. Like he wants to be this amazing warrior.
Yeah.
And he's just kind of friendly, but he doesn't understand maybe complex social nuances and stuff like that. So he is always an interesting addition to like conversations because he comes from a totally different direction.
I call him a goofball in my script, and I mean it as a biggest compliment ever. He made me smile, when everything else was terrible. So I really liked him being part of the group.
Yeah, and that's the same for me. He made me smile too, so I enjoyed writing him in that regard. And then my other character I enjoyed to write, because Kai isn't a major character, he's kind of a side character. But Everett, I think, was a lot of fun to write.
Okay.
He's one of the few characters that interacts with most other characters.
That's true.
So while a lot of the characters don't interact with like the full cast of the book, Everett is one of them that has interacted with a lot of them. And that's interesting. I think his internal conflict and the way that plays out is kind of fun.
Okay. I think my favorite character, it's kind of hard because there's Ned. He's just a cinnamon roll. I love Ned. He's so adorable and so wholesome. He always wants to help everybody. I'm like, oh, I want to give you a hug. Damien is
Yeah.
sassy and very smart. I really like him. And Chaz was also very fun too. So I think these are my top three. In what order,
Oh,
I don't
good.
know, but I enjoyed them a lot. Ooh, what's the biggest misconception readers might have about your main character before they start reading? I will say, I grabbed the book and looked at the cover and I'm like, what is going on here? Beautiful cover, don't get me wrong, but I'm like, what am I looking at? There are so many details. I'm like, okay, what is going on? He's holding a notebook. There's some magic circles, it looked like, going on around him. He's obviously missing an arm. What happened to him? It was very intriguing.
That's a great preface, because one of the things is this character does have one arm.
Yeah.
And that's established pretty early on in the book. Actually, I guess chapter 1 kind of is the history of how it happens.
Yes.
But whenever I feel like it's pretty common in fiction and fantasy, when you see a character with one arm, they get a new arm.
Yes.
Like Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, he gets it chopped off, he gets another one,
Right.
Full Metal Alchemist, he has a robotic arm.
Exactly, yeah.
And one of the things is he never gets another arm. Not in this book, and it's not going to happen in any of the books.
I love that. Thank you. I actually love that. It's great to have a character like this as a main character too. What's one character relationship in your book that you think readers will be most invested in?
I would say Damien and Ned's relationship,
Yes.
I think, is a really big one. But also, unfortunately, Ned isn't in it the whole time.
Yeah.
And so once you kind of get past some of that, I think it's Damien and Chaz's relationship. They kind of trade off. So.
Exactly. That was the two I was thinking of. I thought we were talking about Full Metal Alchemist, and Damien and Ned really reminded me of Edward and Alphonse. That anime is a masterpiece, so this is a very big compliment.
I also love that anime.
Yeah. I hope we get more of Ned. We need more Ned. What's a moment in the book that you think will make readers gasp or throw their book across the room in a bad or good way?
So I thought that when we see the inciting incident from Ned's perspective, I was thinking that would make the reader gasp and hopefully throw the book across the room in a good way. Or a bad way. I guess it's kind of both. And then just context for that. My book is primarily from Damien's perspective, but every so often there's a short chapter from another character's perspective. And so that's one of those chapters. So we've seen that chapter essentially happen at the beginning of the book from Damien's perspective, but now we go back later on and we see it from Ned's, and it's kind of interesting to get that extra context.
I don't think I ever wanted to throw the book across the room, but I did have to stop at sometimes and just close it, put it on my desk, and slowly walk away. Take a breather, because this book has some really heavy themes. It sure does a good job at making you reflect on some things.
Hopefully it's not too abrasive. It's hard to tackle big topics and do them justice without shying away from maybe being like, oh, we're just going to put a nice lens, a filter on it that makes it all happy.
Yeah, understood. Well, but in the same vein, what's a theme or message in your book that you hope readers will take away with them?
So I've thought a lot about the theme as I was writing this book and working on it in general. And kind of the big theme for me and my goal was to make it so the idea is that everyone's dealt different cards in life. You can have really hard situations, big disadvantages, unfairness, whatever it is. But despite all of that, you can still make a big difference. You can kind of come out on top. And that's kind of the big theme, I feel like, in the book. And my goal for the theme is to say even your trials can work for your good in your end, in the end.
That is beautiful, because Damien does go through a lot of horrible things, and yet, he just keeps persevering, and we all wish to be a little bit like Damien sometimes, Without spoilers, what's one question you hope readers will be asking themselves as they turn the final page? Obviously, what is going on? But aside from that...
The biggest question I want my readers to ask themselves is, who can I share this book with?
Ooh.
But that's like self-promotion. That's not really what you were asking.
No, I mean, that counts. That counts. Unless you have another answer.
I do also have another answer. So I do think, again, kind of going to the creativity, I think the problems that are solved and the creative ways that happen are big, but also as the character is discovering more and creating more and learning more, there's kind of new mysteries that pop up. And
Yep.
so I think the final page, I want the reader to think about like, oh, what are going to be the new things that Damien discovers? Like, what new things are we going to learn about this world, about magic, about, all that stuff. I want the reader to keep thinking about it and potentially figure out more on their own based off of the clues in the book, or just being excited to learn more in the next book.
What's a fantasy trope that you intentionally subverted or played with in your book?
This one, it's not like a major theme of my book, but
Uh-huh.
it was important to me to not have the mom die.
Oh my gosh, thank
Or,
you.
because that's a pretty common trope, right? And there's
Yes.
reasons to like, oh, now the character's off on their own, and how do you figure out the world?
Right.
But I didn't want to get rid of the mom. So she's still alive. She's still around.
And the mom is great, strongest mom I've ever seen. What's one book that you think fans of The Heretic would also enjoy?
I would say The Will of the Many. I would say there's definitely a lot of academia in it as well, kind of a lot of discovery. There's kind of school aspect to it a little bit. There's also like mysteries and kind of magic-ish stuff, as well as kind of combat stuff. So I don't know, similar in those ways maybe.
Infiltration, spying.
Yep, that too.
Awesome. That does sound exciting. Okay, that's a very popular book too, so I'm sure, or I hope at least, that people that have read and loved that book will give The Heretic a chance.
Oh, thank you.
If you could have any fantasy author, living or dead, read your book, who would it be, and what's one question you'd want to ask them afterwards?
Oh, this one's a hard one because there's so many authors that
I
I
know.
look up to and would love to talk with them or have them read my book, as the question says.
Right.
I'd probably choose Brandon Sanderson. I feel like he was one of the authors that kind of has inspired me as I grew up and as I wrote and things. But there's a lot of other authors that are amazing too that I'd love to read my book. But if Brandon Sanderson read it, I'd probably ask him. This is actually true for any author that I like, or any author in general. But I would ask them, what ways do you think I could improve? What's an area that I should focus on more, whether that's like pacing or prose, character development, whatever it is. I'd love to get that feedback from someone I admire.
Yeah, I mean, Brandon Sanderson is a big name in the genre, and in general, I feel like he's done so much and he's writing so fast, I can't ever catch up. Oh my gosh, last question already. Wow. Wow. We went through these so fast. What is the most unexpected thing you learned about yourself while writing this book? This is a deep question.
This is a deep question. I think on a simple way is I kind of learned how much I enjoyed writing. So actually, fun fact, I started this as a web comic. Like, I originally did it with pictures and all that kind of stuff. And that was a lot of fun. And even though my background is on the drawing art side of things, I learned just how much I liked writing, so much so that it transitioned from like a pure comic to kind of like big paragraphs of writing with like one picture to just writing. So I kind of learned how much I enjoyed writing through the process of writing my book, which doesn't sound so crazy, but it was a revelation to me.
That's awesome to hear. Were you actually, I guess additional question, were you more of a discovery writer, or did you outline everything? Did you draw a picture, like you said, for every key moment or anything like that?
Because the whole process of me discovering how I write, I started off kind of having really, really slim outlines and doing a lot more discovery. And I realized that doesn't work well for me. So the more time that went on, the more I did very heavy outlining, and that works really well. So much so for this second book, as I've kind of learned everything I have from putting together and publishing this first book. Now the second book, the outline is like, it's very specific, very long. I have like dialogue in my outlines and stuff like that. So it's quite detailed. And then with that too, I also like you said, drawing. So I put together like image reference boards where it's like, oh, I imagine this kind of place, or I do little sketches or whatever. So I definitely have also it's like my noun sheet that has images and inspiration and stuff like that too.
That's a good way to keep track of everything. I feel like it's very easy to, get lost, especially when fantasy, you kind of have to come up with everything, including the world and stuff. You need to keep track of your own rules, your own information that you came up with.
Totally.
All right. I have no more questions. I feel like even the spoiler ones, most of the spoiler ones, I can't even remember now. Sucks, but I guess when when I'll be working on my script a little more, I'm sure they're gonna come to me, and I'll be shooting an email for sure.
Well, that sounds great. And always feel free to email me. It's super fun to chat
Good.
with you, and I love watching your videos. So I'm
Thank
sure I'll
you.
enjoy this review as well.
Thank you very much. I'll try not to roast you too much.
Feel free. My background, like I said, I do art all day
Yes.
for Lucasfilm, and all day we just critique or get
Yeah.
critiqued on our stuff. So I'm used to feedback, and I'm happy to get
If you're familiar with my content, you know how snappy I am sometimes. I was like, what did you
it.
just say?
It's fun.
Well, this was very fun. Thank you very much for suggesting this. It was your idea, and I'm so glad you were willing to take the time to have this little moment with me. I'm very glad you reached out to me in general. Thank you. Thank you for finding my channel somehow and thinking, oh hey, let's shoot her an email. I'm very honored. Thank you very much.
I'm very honored too. It's been great to interact with you and to see your channel in general.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so grateful that you read my book and didn't think I was a scam.
All right, well, thank you very much. I guess I'll talk to you later. I'm actually going to go work on my script right after this. So I'm gonna do my
Awesome.
best to make that video ASAP.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, I'll see you. Bye bye.
See you later.
See ya.